The latest playoff rankings are awful for many reasons, and you need look no further than Indiana again.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Oh boy, here we go. Welcome everybody to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with this, the greatest sport on planet Earth, no matter how many times it drives me insane. This episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, where guess what? You can get a big return. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We'll talk about the Big 12. Why can't BYU get more at-large consideration? Why? I'm going to talk about that with my guy Drake Toll later. And Mountain West Championship game, play-in playoff matchup on Friday night. Old school conference championship feel where you have to win to get in. That's not really the case for anybody else except for Clemson this week. But we'll talk about that and how that game gets decided. But I want to start with the playoff rankings. Gosh almighty. This is irrational. This is irrational. Not me. I'm being rational and sane. The playoff committee is not. So what I find most perplexing about these playoff committee rankings is what your record is matters. Well, unless you're a certain team. So Indiana is ranked number 9. They went up one spot because Miami fell down after blowing a 21-point lead at Syracuse. Mario Cristobal and company, their playoff hopes done, dashed because they blew a 3-touchdown lead to a Syracuse team that's now inside the top 25 and deservedly so. What a season for Fran Brown. But Indiana is ranked number 9. Number 9, which means if nothing changes radically, and Ward Manuel, the Miami athletic director, chair of the committee, has indicated that no, if you're not playing in a conference championship game, nothing's going to change for you. You're not going to move up. You're not going to move down, all this sorts of thing. I'm like, okay, we'll see how that goes. I hope they don't punish SMU too much. Thoughts on that in a moment. Indiana's ranked number 9. Notre Dame's ranked number 4. They're ranked number 4. Can you please name for me the best win for Notre Dame? This is, again, important distinction to make. This is not an anti-Notre Dame segment. This is an anti-committee's thinking and pointing out how wildly illogical this all is. Why is Notre Dame at 11-1, no conference championship, ranked 5 spots ahead of Indiana, 11-1, no conference championship? What is Notre Dame's best win? The answer is Army. The answer is Army because that's the only ranked team currently that they have beat. And by the way, if Army loses the American Conference Championship game to Tulane, they won't be ranked anymore. And you'll look at a Notre Dame schedule that has 0 ranked wins at the end of the season. You can think of that whatever you'd like. That's just going to be the reality on the ground because their best win has been Texas A&M for a long time. And Texas A&M, wait for it, isn't ranked. They were dropped from the rankings because they're sitting there at 8-4. On paper coming into this year, I predicted Notre Dame to go 11-1 because I thought they're a really good team. I think they are a really good team. I think Notre Dame and Tennessee are under the radar teams that can absolutely go out and win a national championship. But to say that the committee is thinking logically by having Notre Dame 5 spots ahead of Indiana is absolutely insane. It is complete and utter madness. It does not make any sense. Because they have a ranked win at the time against Texas A&M on the road. That's still a good win. I'm not taking that away from you. But where's the great win? It's not a great win. It's a good win. Winning against Louisville, who's a solid team, that's a good win. Georgia Tech, that's a good win. And you keep going down, and Navy and Army, who might be unranked at the end of the year, you blew out those teams. And look, I thought Navy'd hang with them. I knew Army wouldn't once I watched them play Navy because Notre Dame's a really good football team. So you're telling me you're giving Notre Dame credit for, what is it? Blowing out inferior competition? Well, what do you know? Who's really good at that? Oh, that's right. Indiana is. That's all they have done. So you can't find a hugely signature win on this resume. You can find better wins than what Indiana's put together. I'll give you that. Indiana beat Michigan, by the way. How does that win look right now? Are you telling me that's a dramatically different win than Georgia Tech or Louisville? I'm not. I'm not putting it right there in the same category. So Texas A&M is probably still the best win because it was on the road on Notre Dame's schedule. Okay, it's a good win. Who's Notre Dame's loss again? Oh, that's right. It's NIU. Northern Illinois out of the Mid-American Conference. I love me some action. Tuesday and Wednesday night action gets me through the week. But in what world are you punishing Indiana for losing at Ohio State? I don't even care what the margin is, more than you are punishing Notre Dame for losing to Northern Illinois at home. How does that make sense? How? It doesn't. It doesn't. The answer is brand bias, of course. Again, I am not anti-Notre Dame being in the playoff. Heck, if this were the 4-team playoff, I'd probably still have Notre Dame in that particular discussion. But it's not, so we need not have that hypothetical. I thought Notre Dame would go 11-1 and make the playoff this year. Notre Dame went 11-1. They're making the playoff. I'm in favor of them getting into the playoff. I am just pointing out how ridiculous this committee is. 5 spots ahead because they have some good wins, more than what you determine with Indiana, and then you punished Indiana far more for their loss because it occurred later in the season? Because it was by 23 points? What's more embarrassing? Losing to an average Mid-American Conference school? They're not in the conference championship game, by the way. Losing to that team at home or losing to a top 10 team, number 6 to be exact, on the road? What's more embarrassing? Which one? You tell me. You tell me. So, yeah, record matters right until record doesn't matter. So record matters for Notre Dame. Well, they're 11-1 and other people are 10-2. Okay, so Miami's 10-2, BYU's 10-2, Arizona State's 10-2, but they're all behind Alabama at 9-3. Arizona State, Iowa State, they're playing in the Big 12 championship game. They're behind Ole Miss at 9-3. That's weird. So record doesn't matter. We're just flip-flopping, going around and all over the place. Yeah, that's super cool. So here's something I wonder about. First of all, I'm a huge Clemson fan. I don't want a 9-3 team to be in the playoff. Not that 9-3 Bama team. I'd put in Ole Miss before Bama, but it'll be Alabama. Why? Because they're Alabama. There is no other explanation there. Lane Kiffin, though somewhat flawed because Brett Bielema called him out and kind of laid out the case for Illinois and made some good points. Lane Kiffin laid out why Ole Miss has got a stronger resume. I mean, Ole Miss, after all, beat Oklahoma. Alabama was blown out by Oklahoma. So that's a common opponent. Well, what about Georgia? Bama didn't win by as much as Ole Miss did. That's interesting. But anyway, so something that I'm crossing my fingers about here, SMU's in the conference championship game. They're 11-1. They're right. SMU's 8th behind 10-2 Tennessee, 10-2 Ohio State, 10-2 Georgia. Okay, so record doesn't matter. But it does matter? It doesn't? I don't know. But SMU, if they were to lose to Clemson, would be 11-2. I am fingers crossed on my knees praying to God that doesn't result in SMU getting dropped out of the playoff. Because I just watched a team out of the ACC who's good. I just watched them go toe-to-toe with the team that the committee, in their own view, is one of the 5 best in all of college football. Yeah, I watched them do that. And by the way, speaking of SMU, why are they so far behind Notre Dame? Would you like to explain that? Their loss is to BYU. That's a top 20 team. They lost by 3 points. It was early in the season, which according to the committee doesn't count as much. You know, you get a mulligan and do-over. You lose late in the year, oh, that's no good or anything like that. Well, they also beat Louisville. They've got to win against a 9-win Duke team. They've got to win against Pitt on there. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm just saying. TCU's a bowl team out of the Big 12. SMU beat them too. Where's the value? Where's the value? It is inconsistent. Then there was a tweet from Jamie Pollard, who is the athletic director at Iowa State. He said, quote, disappointing that strength of schedule clearly does not matter for SMU, Indiana, and Boise State. Message is clear. Win as many games as possible regardless of who you play. Time to rethink non-conference scheduling. Very different standards than the basketball committee, end quote. He is right that there are very different standards in college basketball. It's a different sport, but he is right about that. He's also not wrong that in certain situations, but not every situation, you're going to get the benefit of the doubt because your record's better. Not Miami over Bama. You know, that we can't have that. We can't possibly do that. But we can do all these other things as well. So it's ridiculous. That's my rant. End rant. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Why can't the Big 12 be an at-large team? Why are they a one-bid league? Well, we're going to talk about that more coming up next. First, let's talk about better together. Do you hate the team that you drafted in season-long fantasy but want to stay in on the action? I know that at least some of you have. Introducing Better Together, the first cooperative daily fantasy platform where teamwork triumphs talent and you can play with your friends, not against them. What you do is you pick more or less on real-time player stats, strategize with your partner to boost your odds, and climb the leaderboard together. So grab a friend and join the social daily fantasy movement at Better Together. It provides a sense of camaraderie, which is what you're looking for, of course. Activities to do with your friends, whether you're in the same place or whether you are thousands of miles apart, you can both get together on Better Together and enhance the social experience of watching sports. And look, daily fantasy sports, it can be fun alone, but like a lot of other things in life, it's better with friends. Download Better Together now from the App Store and sign up using promo code LOCKEDON for a free $10 entry into any NCAA football or NFL contest. Remember, the promo code is locked on because winning alone is fun, but it's better together. Download Better Together now from the App Store. Sign up using that promo code locked on. Winning alone, it is fun. No doubt about it. Winning's great, but it's better together. Go check them out today. BYU had a great season, 10-2. They will get absolutely positively zero consideration to be an at-large playoff team. Miami's in the same boat. Is that right? That's Drake Toll, Locked On Big 12. You think it's wrong, Drake. Why?
Yeah, I think it's wrong because BYU to this point deserves a shot that isn't a hypothetical. Oh, well, BYU would lose to Alabama. They would lose to South Carolina. We know they would lose to Ole Miss and Miami, except we don't know that. We keep playing these hypothetical games of what about these 9-3 SEC teams that should be ranked above BYU? Well, BYU's 10-2. What about this Miami team?
Michigan's going to lose to Ohio State. Vandy's going to lose to Bama. Kentucky's beating Ole Miss. Hypotheticals, man.
You've been listening
undefeated,
to
right?
A lot of On3 and ESPN, my friend. Very good. Picking up a national narrative that to me just isn't. If we do the blind test of college football playoff contenders, BYU has 2 ranked wins. One of those is a top 10 win. That's more than South Carolina. For BYU, win against Power Fours, they have 8. South Carolina has 6, and one of their 2 losses was against a ranked team in the Big 12 championship who is going to play for a spot in the college football playoff. Their other loss was our preseason Big 12 champion who didn't pan out. But what I think you see a lot of times in the SEC is that Kentucky loss or that Arkansas loss, whether it's Tennessee or Ole Miss, they're losing to teams that aren't on a win streak, that aren't hot. They're these sporadic, weird Oklahoma, Alabama. Oh, you lost. Whereas in the Big 12, a lot of these upsets were facing a Kansas team that rattled off 4 straight and looked dominant for a stretch of their season. Looked like the preseason Kansas we were promised. So I don't consider those to be as fluky as a lot of people would look from the, oh, you're 10-2 and lost to Kansas standpoint. I think BYU has a fighter's chance when you look at 9-3 ahead of them. BYU's 10-2, and those SEC teams played 8 conference games and then 4 random one-off games aside from that South Carolina Clemson game. I want to know why the SEC can keep getting away with that, and the Big 12 has to sit idle with the team that's got more wins than them.
I think this is an appropriate time to bring up the ridiculousness of the late season SEC ACC cupcake. I am in favor of a 9-game conference slate. I am not as aggrieved about it when your non-conference game or one of them is a protected rivalry against the ACC. So sure. Georgia Tech, Clemson, South Carolina, Florida State. Those sorts of games, if that's what your 9th conference game would be and it's that instead, I am okay with it. Yeah. But where I'm not okay, Drake, is to your point. What if BYU, do you realize that BYU, if they'd been able to schedule Mercer the second to last week, Wofford, Citadel, if they'd been able to do that in the second to last week of the regular season, they would be in the college football playoff right now, and no one, not a single person, would bat an eye or seriously object.
Can I tell you the
yes,
main
you
thing
can.
that
I will permit it.
Learned this week is your non-conference games, don't play anybody. Don't. Go 4-0, 3-0 in non-conference, get to the end of the year, and let your record speak for itself. Why? Because I would rather beat Wofford than lose to a pretty solid LSU team or lose to a decent team that's in the top 15 like Miami. I would rather beat Wofford than have a loss on my record, and you're seeing that right now.
I see that. Allow me to present the other side of it. The reason we can have this discussion and why I do believe there is some validity to it, BYU, and yeah, you can say the SEC is better in the Big 12 if you would like, but BYU has played more Power 4 teams, and they didn't have a cupcake late in the conference. It's not just that there's one less conference game. It's that when everyone's beat up, when everyone's grinding, when Oregon's going to Wisconsin and grinding out, or Penn State's going to Minnesota and they're eking out wins because they're playing a conference opponent, these teams are playing schools that have zero chance of winning the football game. BYU, though.
Hey, ask Auburn in 2023.
Well, that was at least, an FBS team, not an FCS team. But hey, Hugh Freeze will be back for another year, so you never know. There's still time. But I think that for BYU, one of the reasons that I think this is a reasonable discussion to have, and not just, the Big 12 getting screwed, but actually look at the nuts and bolts of the Alabama versus BYU resume comparison, is Alabama's got a top 10 win, right? Against Georgia. What does BYU have? Oh, that's right. A top 10 win. So there's a risk reward calculation. Like imagine if you were, and clearly it hasn't been enough, but imagine if you were comparing 9-3 Alabama to 10-2 BYU. That's not what they're doing. They're just completely overlooking a BYU or even a Miami in this spot for that matter. Miami's got a better record against bowl-eligible teams than Alabama does, but Alabama's got the Georgia win, and Miami's got a win against Florida, which only counts as a great loss for Ole Miss, does not count as a good win for Miami, of course.
Yeah, and if you look at the BYU game against SMU, now we're talking about, what if Clemson gets a win against the regular season ACC champion? Didn't BYU already do that and on the road, not at a neutral site? That was one of the main questions that national analysts have asked this week as well. Clemson now has a win against the regular season champ. But then I raised my hand and say, well, we have that too. We already did that on the road. But what I've learned is anything that happened in September doesn't exist. Hey, it's a brand new football team now. They're playing different ball. There was that key injury. We do this every single year. That Notre Dame loss, forget about it. It's a mulligan. In a 12-team playoff, you get a mulligan. The only time you don't is when you lose late. Had BYU lost these two games in the first three of their season in the same format to Kansas and a top 15 team, they would be a top 10, top 15 squad, undoubted right there in the mix.
I don't know about top 10, but I think top 15. I think they'd be more in the mix because I agree.
If they won 8 straight, I mean that you're just climbing from there. You're ascending, and Spencer,
that's true. That's the South Carolina. That's the South Carolina discussion. It's like, oh my gosh, they're red hot. You got to put them in. Like, no, you can't because these results happen. I'm sorry you don't like the outcome for this or that reason, but even if you put the LSU game aside and the bad call from the officials, you still had a chance to beat Bama. You didn't. You still could have beaten Ole Miss at home. You got walloped. Yeah. Those things have to matter. But the reason that I'm rooting for Clemson this week, Drake, is if they win, this is all simplified. Because, I hope and pray, cannot guarantee, I hope and pray 11-2 SMU isn't bypassed for a 9-3 Alabama team that got whooped by Oklahoma.
Yep. And at that point, if Clemson does win, I agree with you there. We can decide, all right, there's no other Big 12 team getting in. There's no way we have a 9-3 SEC team that we have to let in here over an SMU who sits with 2 losses. But what did the committee tell us, Spencer? If you lose in your conference championship game, we're not going to harm you for that. It doesn't. I mean, we're
except, I'm so glad you mentioned that because what do you want to bet?
It's the biggest farce.
That Arizona State has a 0, and I mean 0% chance of getting into the playoff if they lose to Iowa State this Saturday.
For sure. And to that point, at the end of the year, if you go, hey, Arizona State's the Big 12's regular season champion, they're going to the playoff. Like, okay. In any given year where the Big 12's got a team who's 5th and 9th, don't play the conference championship game. Just don't. There's no point in playing a conference title game at that point because you're going to get left out if you're that 9th-ranked team and you lose. I guarantee it. They're lying to you. This is a fun thing. It's a fun narrative to have until it goes against the Big 12 and they just, that's low-hanging fruit and leave you out of the college football playoff with a two-bid league. And we're only going to get one in. That's it. But if you blind resume it,
the Big 12 is going to get in. Think about this. The Big 12 is going to get in the same number of teams as the Group of 5.
Yes.
And you can throw that accusation, the Big 12 is a Group 5 conference. I am watching these college football games play out all across the country. There is no way, a couple of things. The gap between the SEC and the Big 12 and the ACC is as big as you thought it was. Georgia Tech is just one example of that. There are others, but that's one particular example. And to pretend that a team in the Group 5, if they have a great season, would have the same record if they were in the Big 12 or the ACC, absolutely, positively. I know we're not big on hypotheticals here, but I'm not buying that, Drake. I don't know who would put their money on it. Or here's another way to think about it. If you did what college basketball does, and you do conference challenges, and you were to say, all right, we're going to put R1 against your one, and R2 against you, and you go all the way down. Big 12 against the Mountain West, top to bottom, 1 through however many teams are in the Mountain West, because probably not quite as many as the Big 12. Who is going to put their money on the Mountain West?
Hey, who's going to put their money on the Big 10? You get to Team 5 and you start going, oh, shoot. Things get real thin in that conference after you get to the top, after you get past the top half. Whereas in the Big 12, we've had like 8 teams ranked this year because at any point in time, these schools have gotten hot and played good football. Baylor is a great example of that, too, at 8-4 now under Dave Aranda, having won 6 straight. So,
Baylor, 8-4. How about that?
The Bears. They're keeping the coach. They're keeping
How
the
about before you go, Drake?
Yeah.
A 5-second response. Rich Rodriguez to West Virginia. Does it make any sense?
Not when Nick Saban has already accepted the job. Thank you, Spencer. Always
Drake
a pleasure.
Toll, locked on Big 12. Serious, a solid 60% of the time, and we appreciate that.
Whatever.
All right, cool. Yeah, the Mountain West Championship game. Winner to the playoff. Same thing in the Big 12. How does the Mountain West title game get decided? Boise State, UNLV, the rematch. I know how it gets decided. I will tell you next. First, let's talk about FanDuel. They're America's #1 sportsbook. They're the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Network. So if you have a hunch about how these conference championship games are going to play out, well, guess what? FanDuel.com is available, and right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything that you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can do all sorts of things. You can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you're placing your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. It could be on something as simple as picking who you know is going to win the Big 12 or the ACC or the Big 10 or the SEC Championship or the Mountain West Championship or the MAC Championship this week. It's all over there at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. It's a play-in game. It is a play-in game for Boise State and UNLV. UNLV, what a job by Barry Odom. His name is going to keep popping up in coaching circles, folks. It just is. Doesn't matter what's happened in the past. What have you done for me lately? Taken UNLV and not just brought them back to what they were, because I don't know that there really was a time where they were something, at least not that I can remember. He's just made them into something relevant. Back-to-back appearances in the Mountain West Championship game. UNLV and my guy Ricky White, who was on the show earlier a couple weeks ago, which was awesome. They're getting another crack at Boise State. And I'll have my pick later at the end of the segment, but I want to give you 3 pivot points. Spencer, what's pivot point? I'm so glad you asked. You didn't, but you're going to get to hear about it anyway. A pivot point is different from a key to the game. A key to the game applies to a specific team. You've got to do this with you got to get this guy going. You got to stop the other team. Pivot points are things that can go either way. They can flip in this direction or they could pivot in that direction. And here are 3 pivot points that are going to define this game. Number 1. Well, this is going to be Ashton Jeanty, right? Nope, it's absolutely not. It's going to be which quarterback has a higher completion percentage. So, Malik Williams, who has taken over and been fantastic in the loss to Boise State, was 12 of 21 throwing the football. Also had an interception late in the first half that proved incredibly costly. In the other loss he's had as UNLV's starter, it was against Syracuse. He was 21 of 25. But this is, again, Boise State, and UNLV still could have, dare I say, should have, won that football game against who we know is a good Syracuse team ranked inside the top 25. But Malik Williams this year is completing 64% of his passes. Flip over to the Boise State angle, and Maddox Madsen, who won the job in spring or fall camp from Malachi Nelson, the former 5-star USC recruit, look, he's not anything special at the quarterback spot. but he's incredibly solid. He's incredibly capable. And when the Boise State offense is humming, Dirk Cutter loves to use play action. He's very clever, very creative, pro-style concepts, and Madsen is a high-level executor. 61%. That's his completion percentage this year. Against Oregon, he completed 50% of his passes. They lost that game by 3. Against Wyoming, a game they struggled to win, he was 14 of 26. Against Nevada, another game Boise State struggled to win, he was 9 of 20. So when he is not able to complete passes in an efficient way, Boise State does not play its best football. You think about Ashton Jeanty and say, well, he's the key. He's what makes it go. He's where the offense starts. He's not the end point, per se. He's not an entire dish. I love food analogies because they're delicious. Ashton Jeanty is the steak, but what else is on that plate? Mashed potatoes, vegetables, and preferably a béarnaise sauce. I'm a big béarnaise sort of guy. Well, Jeanty can't make up all those other components, but Maddox Madsen makes up several. Drop back passing game, play action passing game. And then you got to be solid in other areas, obviously, as well. Cross your T's, dot your I's, and such. So whichever quarterback has the higher completion percentage in this game, if you told me that right now, I'd say that team probably wins. That team probably wins. There's going to be plenty of attention paid to the running ability of Hajj Malik Williams or of Ashton Jeanty in this game, which I'm about to talk about. But first things first, whichever quarterback is more efficient, I think goes on to win the football game and goes to the college football playoff and maybe even gets a bye. I don't think UNLV would jump up and get the bye over the Big 12 champion. Boise State clearly would. You think of that, whatever you like. Pivot point number 2 is the running game factor. Can UNLV replicate what it did in the first matchup in Las Vegas many moons ago? It was a great game, highly competitive, 29-24 final. Boise State gets the win. Ashton Jeanty, 33 carries, 128 yards, under 4 yards a carry, a long run of 16. That's not the Ashton Jeanty who has propelled himself into the Heisman Trophy discussion, only to finish second, of course, to Travis Hunter because he's, really, really good and such. I'd vote for Jeanty, but I understand why Travis Hunter's going to win the award. I don't think it's outlandish. I just think it's a matter of disagreement and preference and such, but I digress. UNLV was bottling up Ashton Jeanty, got loose a little bit as the game went on, but that's not the efficient day that Boise State has relied on to carry an explosive offense. No runs over 20 yards, under 4 yards a carry. If you do that, UNLV has a great chance. But if that gets pivoted back in Boise State's direction, then suddenly the Broncos are an even more dangerous offense. And the passing attack is even more lethal because, like I said, Dirk Cutter, the offense coordinator, really good with play action. Really, really good. He runs a lot of NFL concepts. He always seems to have the tight end wide open whenever they need him to. So that's pivot point number 2. Pivot point number 3. In a game, the Boise State is favored by around a field goal, according to our friends at FanDuel. I expect to be close and competitive because last time they played, it was close. It was competitive. It came down to a couple situations. I almost went turnovers here. I have a sneaky suspicion. That special teams are going to loom large. That there is going to be a play. It could be a block kick. It could be a return. It could be a long field goal. Something is going to swing the special teams momentum or the overall grade in the game towards one team or the other. And that is pivot point number 3. Which quarterback has the higher completion percentage? Can UNLV replicate its Ashton Jeanty defensive performance in the way that they bottled him up more than most others have been able to so far? And who wins the special teams battle? Who can make that one play? It might be kicking. It might be in the return. Heck, it could be a punt that allows your defense to get the ball back because you had them pinned down and they just had to hand it off a couple times. It could be anything like that. So the moment you've all been waiting for, of course, my game prediction here. Look, UNLV is a good football team, a really good football team. I think conference championship weekend as a whole is going to be outstanding. Every single point spread is under a touchdown. I think every point spread is under 5. That means Vegas expects a lot of tight competitive games. The stakes in this one are massive. A group of 5 team has made the playoff but one time. That was Cincinnati many moons ago with Luke Fickell. They went undefeated. They'd beaten Notre Dame earlier in the season. But whoever wins this game, make no mistake about it, they will not get challenged by the American Conference champ. That will not take place. Army could beat Tulane. Tulane is not ranked, so it does not matter. They will not climb up. They will not be a high enough ranked conference champion. This is a play-in game. Big stakes here. And for Spencer Danielson, who a year ago at this time was just learning, actually, hold on. Boise State fans, you correct me if I'm wrong. A year ago at this time, Spencer Danielson hadn't even been named the head coach yet. He was the interim head coach. He was interviewing for the job. I think it's going pretty darn well. And I think it will continue to do so here. I don't think UNLV, as impressive as they were at home against Ashton Jeanty, I don't think they can keep him under 4 yards of carry again. I think Jeanty goes for 150 plus, maybe a couple touchdowns. This is a fun, competitive, high-scoring football game, 36-31. I'll take Boise State to win. I'll take Boise State to cover as well. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.